Mike Mentzer seems to be kind of more popular lately. He seems to be getting a lot more searches. People are looking for Mike Mentzer content online, and some of these search engines are optimizing for it.
What's interesting is that whenever Mike was given a platform, he was compelling and he made sense. He was sort of, known even in his lifetime as the voice of reason in bodybuilding. Unfortunately, since his passing, there's been a void. A lot of people who are now in the marketplace selling competitive products have shouted him down. Mike was out of date. Mike was crazy. None of that was true. That bothered me a lot as a friend. I would hear things or see things on the internet or on YouTube, and they're misrepresenting what he said. And it dawned on me that Mike was his own best spokesperson too. Let him speak for himself.
Mike was one of those rare people who had to reassess a lot of what he thought he knew. With Mike, you have these two sides, two views on high intensity training, on strength training, bodybuilding training in general, but most people only have one of those viewpoints.
Welcome to another episode brought to you by Imagine Strength, the future of safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Are you a HIT studio owner looking for equipment that's not just top-notch, but also tailored to your specific needs? Imagine Strength is your answer. Inspired by the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength is revolutionizing the HIT industry with their state-of-the-art yet affordable equipment. Their team doesn't just sell HIT equipment, they live and breathe it. I've personally experienced their gear at the Resistance Exercise Conference, and let me tell you, it was an intense workout that I won't soon forget, in the best way possible, of course. So why choose Imagine Strength? Number one, they provide customized solutions for HIT studios. Number two, they have budget-friendly yet high-performance designs. And number three, they're committed to innovation and excellence in high-intensity training specifically. Founder Jeff Turner and his dedicated team are on a mission to make HIT accessible to everyone. Getting started is easy. Number one, visit imaginestrength.com. Number two, consult with their expert team. And number three, choose the equipment that will skyrocket your business. Don't wait. Head over to imaginestrength.com and elevate your HIT studio today with Imagine Strength.
Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, your one-stop shop for elevating your HIT business and fueling your passion for high-intensity training. This is episode 461. I'm joined by two of my favorites, Body by Science co-author John Little and HITuni founder Simon Shawcross. We're going to be talking about their new Mike Mentzer course and HITuni and just catching up on all things high-intensity training and otherwise. Gents, great to see you. Really appreciate you making the time to join me on the podcast.
Great to see you as well.
So I thought we would start off by sort of talking a bit about kind of, I wanted to talk about the zeitgeist and the inspiration behind the course. And by zeitgeist, I mean, it seems to be, I don't know if this is true, but Mike Mentzer seems to be kind of more popular lately. He seems to be getting a lot more searches. I'm seeing that in some of the data I've seen. People are saying it in terms of like the algorithms, like people are, I don't know, looking for Mike Mentzer content online, and some of these search engines are optimizing for it. I don't know whether that had anything to do with this. I'm sure knowing you both, it probably didn't, because it's not the way that I don't think you would operate, John. I'm not sure about you, Simon. But I'm just very curious, what inspired you?
I'd say the other guy in your window right there is largely responsible for that.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, John.
I honestly, I would deflect yet again. I would say it's Mike Mentzer. I mean, what's interesting is that whenever Mike was given a platform, he was compelling and he made sense. He was sort of, known even in his lifetime as the voice of reason in bodybuilding. And unfortunately, since his passing, there's been a void. And so consequently, rather than researching Mike, a lot of people who are now in the marketplace selling competitive products have shouted him down. Mike was out of date. Mike was crazy. Mike was, using, reductio ad absurdum. He was training with one set every 7 years, and what he recommended, when none of that was true. And that bothered me. a lot as a friend would be bothered, you know, and I would hear things or see things on the internet or on YouTube, and thought, well, that's not true. They're misrepresenting what he said. And many years ago in 1998, I did a film for Warner Brothers called Bruce Lee in His Own Words. And the motif of the film was that Bruce Lee is his own best spokesperson. So if I could fashion a platform and all the audience heard were his words from him, there could be no quibbling as to what Bruce Lee meant, what he intended, what his beliefs were. And so that's what I did. And at the time, of course, everybody was selling a Bruce Lee this or a Bruce Lee that, and how they had taken his art to, you know, the 21st century or the 20th century then, and really evolved it. You know, Bruce was okay for the late 60s, early 70s, but, you know, we're doing this, this, and this. And I thought, you know what, they're misrepresenting Bruce, but still using him as a lightning rod for their product. And it dawned on me that Mike was his own best spokesperson too, not me, not anybody else. And therefore, let him speak for himself. And if people find it of interest, if they find him compelling or the logic of his arguments makes sense with regard to training or philosophy, great, you know. And so that's what I did. I hadn't anticipated it to be the success that it's become in terms of spreading. But what's kind of cool from my perspective is that it has inspired other people to want to do stuff about Mike. I see other YouTube channels popping up devoted to Mike. And it's like,
and you got people I'm doing the Mike Mentzer challenge of 30 days. Have you seen those popping up as well?
Oh yes, I have seen some of that. Yeah. Hey, as long as it keeps Mike's name out there and keeps him relevant almost a quarter of a century after he's passed away, that is a legacy more enduring than bronze, as Pericles may have said, you know? So yeah, no, I'm very pleased by that. And again, I don't think it's me. I'm just a conduit, you know, I'm bringing the stuff out of the cave. Here's what Mike said about this, but it's Mike who's his own best spokesperson.
So what happened then, Simon? Did you then see this dramatic response to John's content? You went, hey, John, let's create an awesome course about this.
Let me just
Sorry.
No, when Simon and I were talking about this, I don't know that my channel had 20,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So actually the other way around, almost 2 years to the day that I got an email from John saying, hey, Simon, couple of course ideas you might be interested in. Do you want to sort of catch up? And one of those course ideas was doing a course about Mike Mentzer. And I'd worked with John on the 6-minute HIT course, but I co-created with John, must be 4 years ago now. And I knew I'd really enjoy working with him. And the key thing for me also was that Mike was my entree to high intensity training. So some people come via Arthur Jones, some people come via Doug McGuff and John Little. In 1998, 99, it was Mike Mentzer that attracted me to high intensity training. I hadn't heard of it before. I hadn't heard of Arthur Jones before. It was Mike that attracted me. So what I wanted to do when John presented this as an opportunity was really to pay homage to my first mentor in this field, and to get to work with John, who had this really rich 20-year history with Mike, with this person who'd been my guru at the very start of this journey, just was like the opportunity that I wanted. So then the first thing that I thought to do is what can I bring to the table other than, you know, my much shorter recollections of Mike than John's was, well, let's structure this course in a way where we're telling Mike's story and we get the opportunity for both John to talk from his perspective and Mike through John's material of Mike's to speak from here. So we got John and Mike telling the story of Mike Mentzer through this structured course.
Interesting. So this is very different then to some of the stuff you guys have done or the courses you produced in the past, Simon. That might be a little bit more like, focused on training programs and training science. I know there's a training program in here, but a big part of it, listening to you there and looking at the contents, is more about also almost autobiographical about Mike's life, philosophy, like you said, key elements and defining moments in his life. So, and I like the way you described that. Is this correct? So you've got John expressing his opinion about Mike, and then you're sort of not split screening it, but you're contrasting it with footage from Mike. Can you describe that for me? Yeah.
Yeah. So I sat down with John nearly every week for 2 years straight. And we'd sit down like this and talk about different eras of Mike's life. We start with Mike as a preteen and what was happening for him then, how he got attracted to bodybuilding in the first place, what his family relationships were like at that point. And then underneath or alongside, we have clips of Mike or material from that period of Mike's life. So to go back to the 12-year-old, when Mike very first picked up a barbell, John's managed to dig out the original course that Mike followed as a 12-year-old. And we've got that PDF of that in the course, which is just like amazing research on John's part.
Wow, that's amazing. So it sounds almost more like a documentary, if you don't mind me saying, than a course. Is that accurate?
So I would say that there is a strong element of that, but it has this biographical and autobiographical to extent feel to it. But then there's very pragmatic elements to it as well. So then we get into Mike's competitive years and how was he training exactly at that time? Because there's a lot of misinformation around that. How did Mike train? Who were his influences? Where was his mind at that point? What did he do? And then after that, how did he adapt his training as time went by? Why did he leave bodybuilding? What were the lessons he learned from working with people who don't take steroids? So this is something that I think a lot of professional bodybuilders and even guys who aren't professional bodybuilders don't have this sort of touchstone, is if you are a steroid taker or are working with steroid takers all the time, you don't have this second perspective of, oh crap, this suddenly doesn't work when I'm applying it with 80% of people who don't have the right genetic makeup. Mike was one of those rare people, and this really comes out in John's research in the course, who had to reassess a lot of what he thought he knew when he stepped away from training people or being around people who were constantly taking, during the competitive periods, growth enhancing, performance enhancing drugs. So with Mike, you have these two sides, two views on high intensity training, or two views on strength training, bodybuilding training in general. But most people only have one of those viewpoints.
I do want to ask you guys actually more about certainly, there's a few things that really stuck with me, John, from our previous conversations when you talk about Mike. One was when you wanted to wear his watch and it wouldn't fit because his forearms are too large. And the other one was when you guys were, I don't know if you were walking together or maybe Mike was by himself and someone come up to him and said, how do I get a physique like yours? And he said, you need to talk to your parents about that or whatever it is. You need to have better parents, not better parents, but gifted parents. And it's that brutal honesty, which really resonates. So just, I guess, shifting gears slightly, one thing I really like about what you guys put together and I guess HITuni in general, Simon, is none of the three of us are sitting here saying this is like the magic bullet and hope you don't mind me saying this, guys, but this course is going to produce any better results than any other courses necessarily. I mean, there's potentially some nuance to that, but it's like, it strikes me as that you're not necessarily trying to sell a magic bullet necessarily. You're selling a piece of art, something that people are going to really enjoy and learn from, this biographical sort of documentary and also training program therein. It's it's a collection of things. And I don't know, I just think, well, we're in a world where, we've got an internet full of all these different fitness programs, each one promising something new. And it's tiring, right? So I like that you guys are putting together something and you're not making any crazy claims. Again, hopefully that's fair for me to say. And I just think that's great. I think, that's providing real value in that sense, if that's fair to say.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think both of us felt that way. And Mike, I remember Mike telling me years ago, he said he had been this would be in 1990, and he'd been out of the public consciousness in the bodybuilding world for about 3 or 4 years at this point. And during that time, even then, the criticisms were rolling in. Heavy duty was all about lifting the heaviest possible weights. It was going to lead to an injury. It was, Mike, blah, blah, blah. And I said, now that you've been away, so these people have had free reign to say what they want. But now that I, tracked you down and want to ask you some questions, you can set the record straight. And his answer surprised me. He said, I've never recommended training as heavy as possible just for the sake of heavy training. And he kind of nuanced what his version was, high intensity, low force. But he said, I've never even claimed I've had the last word on training. He said, if someone could prove to me that the conceptual underpinnings of heavy duty were flawed, he said, I would be more than ecstatic to learn that. He said, because I'm more interested in the truth than in being proven right or wrong. And that to me was a crystallization of what Mike's approach was. So it would be very disingenuous of Simon and I, when that's Mike's viewpoint, to say, this is, as you say, the magic bullet, or this is going to forget what your genetics are. This is going to be a genetic exploder. You're going to have a 20-inch arm in 3 weeks. That was the very thing that Mike fought against in the industry, was that level of deception. And, take this product, or, crash weight gain number 7 that Joe Weider sold, and you're going to morph into Larry Scott or whomever. He was about bringing science into bodybuilding, and that included the science of genetics, which limits your growth. I just recently saw a fascinating video that Doug McGuff did on that very topic. And
was it the negative hypertrophy is a negative side effect? Is it that one?
I thought that was brilliant. And that makes the case, essentially, what Mike was saying, was that no training program is going to, turn a sow's ear into a silk purse, but if you want, if reason and a rational approach to training appeals, Mike Mentzer's got something to say, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. One, I guess, thing I did want to say is, I understand what you're saying about, I love that, Mike's seeking the truth, right? But when you hear him speak, I don't think he always comes across that way. Now, it might be because I'm not consumed enough heavy duty college, John, and I'm consuming other snippets on the internet. What's that?
That's probably what it is.
That's it. But he can come across very convicted, and like he is got the last word in it. Sometimes how he comes across. Maybe that's just because he's trying to be a clear communicator, and you can't caveat everything you say. But
I think there can be cross purposes here. And Mike was certain about what he was certain about, no question. But one thing I learned in doing these videos, where I have to immerse myself in his talks, is that a much clearer picture of what he was saying emerges. And it's easy to confuse the two. On the one hand, you've got a training method. On the other hand, you have the principles that underlie that training method. And what Mike was saying is there is only one valid theory, i.e. principles of productive exercise. But as far as the training program to be derived from that goes, he said that is the practical application of the principles, and that's going to vary with every individual. So there is no cookie cutter, one size fits all program, but the principles are universally applicable. And by that, which requires some explanation, it is this: exercise to be productive must be intense, brief, and infrequent. We've all heard this. But here is the important thing about that, is that what Mike is saying is exercise to be productive must be performed intensely enough to stimulate an adaptive response. No more, no less than that. It must be brief enough so that you can train intensely enough to stimulate this adaptive response and not move fully onto the side of aerobic activity rather than anaerobic high intensity activity. And the third point is, don't train again until you have recovered and your body has made the adaptation. Now, the way you can validate that is by looking at it and saying, okay, what's the opposite? Is the opposite true? Should you not train intensely enough to stimulate growth? That's the antipode of what he said. Should you train so long that you can't train intensely enough to stimulate growth? And 3, train again before you've had a chance to recover and adapt. Viewed in that context, when he says there is only one valid theory, it makes perfect sense. And it's not as dogmatic at first blush as one might think. But the actual application, he also pointed out there's a huge genetic component to training. And some people simply can't tolerate, 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets. They can't tolerate an hour in the gym. They can't tolerate, and the recovery abilities can't tolerate training more frequently than once every 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And that's what the individual has to work with. So yes, he was certain about what he was certain, that you have to train intensely enough to stimulate growth, that you can't train in an aerobic fashion and expect an anaerobic benefit, and that recovery factors into this. So I don't know if that clarifies it, but that was a very important distinction that I learned in immersing myself or re-immersing myself in what Mike actually said.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It reminds me of, there's a popular saying, firm belief, strong beliefs loosely held, is another way of thinking about it, just having, go ahead.
Well, I mean, he made the comparison on principle with Western medicine. And he used the example from objectivism, but the so-called voodoo witch doctor, who has a 0 success rate with his patients. And then, this patient who's seeing the voodoo witch doctor, happens upon a Western theoretical medical doctor who uses analgesics and sterile operating environments and a firm knowledge of, via CAT scans, et cetera, of the body. And his success rate is, off the chart. And to someone who's not accustomed to that, it's like, you might share the viewpoint that all medical approaches have the same value, just like all training approaches do. So how can you say that there is only one theory, one valid theory of training? And I mean, the theory is there is one valid theory, but the application is going to vary with the individual. I mean, for example, you may be someone who can tolerate the old Nautilus program, where it's 10 to 20 sets, whole body workouts 3 days a week. Whereas Simon may not. Simon may be more along the lines of 3 to 4 sets every 6 days. And me, I might be once every 10 days. But that's just the way it is. That's our genetics. That's our biology. And when you see these people thumping their chest saying, genetics is a cop-out, you can overcome no, you can't. I mean, if that's the case, then show me the program I need to follow to be 6'5". You just can't do it. So,
do you see, I mean, still the claims around, you need 7-10 days. Some people need 7 to 10 days to recover or beyond between workouts. Again, there's a lot of variables, but obviously we won't go into every single detail, but, assuming you're training, to failure, sufficient amount of volume, etc. Do you see, I know you did some studies, back when you wrote Body by Science, and you did some kind of, studies maybe not the right word, but you were measuring obviously recovery in your Nautilus gym, right? but I don't hear that very often. I hear usually, from our colleagues in high intensity training, most people can tolerate twice a week training. And so the research seems to support that. I know that some nuance there, but did you see many people really struggle with that recovery, in terms of like needing like 7 to 10 days between workouts? And Simon, I'll ask John that and ask you exactly the same question, because I'm just curious where you both stand on that right now.
We saw people's progress in terms of performance arrest. Because we originally trained everyone twice a week when I first opened the gym. I didn't know anything about running a gym, back 20 years ago. And I thought, well, people are, at that point, we didn't really know about once a week. I knew that Mike had said some people needed this, 7 days or whatever, but I dismissed it like everyone else. I thought, yeah, okay, sure. So we trained everyone twice a week.
Full body was that?
Full body, yeah. And we do 7, 8, 10 exercises. But we found very quickly, and when I say very quickly, it would be maybe 2 months into the program, the progress stopped. And that was simply the way it was. I mean, for a while, until we got the bod pod in, and it dawned on us to just do a test. What is an optimal training frequency? I didn't know. I'll go into it if you like, but it does, suffice to say that what we found on average for people was 6.6 days. And then we did another study where I learned a lot about the volume of a given workout. We'd started with 6 sets and people lost muscle. We reduced it to 4 and they lost muscle. We reduced it to 3 total sets per workout.
I remember this.
They maintained muscle. And only when we dropped it to 2 sets once a week did they gain. In no instance did we see a much better performance or increase of lean with the higher volume. We didn't see, and at that point it was once a week. People were training. And I can tell you in my own case, when I tested myself to see when my lean would increase a little bit, it was 10 days. Wasn't 3 days, wasn't 4 days, wasn't 5. And, I've heard all sorts of critiques too. Well, bods can be influenced by hydration levels, yada, yada. Nothing changed. We weren't, consuming massive quantities of water to get a false positive. But in no instance did we see, that for the bell curve to be moved over a few standard deviations to the side of more volume. And these were regular folks. The ages ranged from, I'd say, probably 21 to 64. Okay. Kind of people that we deal with on a daily basis, not athletes, not the ones that Doug mentioned who have this responding gift to the stimulus of exercise, regular folks. So if I'm to go by that, and I see no reason not to, because that was the data of about 35 people that we tested. I just don't see the merit. It's like how many angels are dancing on the head of a pin. You got to go twice a week. You got to do 6 sets. No, you don't. And Mike was the first one to really point out, let's see how little is actually necessary. And that's, again, if someone put a gun to my head, so what's the most productive training program you put your clients on? I'm embarrassed to admit that it's 2 sets once a week. But interestingly enough, that ties in perfectly with what his revised consolidated program was in the late 90s. One that everyone dismissed, can't possibly work. It's nonsense, ludicrous. You need, boom, boom, boom. Even high intensity advocates have dismissed it.
Of course. So just to clarify then, sorry, Simon, I'll get to you in a second. So when you dropped it down to 2 sets once a week, it was like big compound movements. And when you say they were making progress, you're talking lean mass improvements on the bod pod.
Yes.
Which, I don't think the bod pod criticisms are really valid, because what is it? Isn't it accurate within 3%? And so long as all conditions are the same when you do the measurement, then if the trend is going in the same direction.
At the time we bought the device, there were studies out that said it was on par with hydrostatic weighing, which is the gold standard,
Right.
rather than, the differential in body fat owing to density in water. It used Boyle's law of displacement, air displacement as a result of heat. And muscle, more metabolically active tissue, produces more heat than body fat does. So it was, Bod Pod's very accurate. In fact, the Mayo Clinic, I think, has one in each facilities.
Mhm.
Certainly more accurate than calipers. It may not be as precise as DEXA, which I think has replaced hydrostatic weighing. But DEXA was not available in our little region. And it doesn't dismiss the data that we got from this. I mean, there should be a certain homogeneousness to results, even if let's say there is an error percentage of 5%. Why are all the benefits, irrespective of that, showing up with 6.6 days and 2 sets, outperforming the other one? I don't have an answer for that. That's simply what the data was. So
Fair enough.
either dismiss the data or accept the data.
Yeah. Let's go to yourself, Simon. Does your experience mirror much of that? The original question being, how often are you seeing, or have you seen, I guess, in terms of HITuni clients and otherwise, people needing 7 to 10 days to recover between workouts to still make progress in terms of, and we have to be specific about what progress means, because you can make progress in different dimensions, but I guess in terms of like strength and muscle mass being the main. What's been your experience with that?
I've got a recent personal anecdote, and what this relates to, I would say, is I think the frequency is absolutely tied to how hard you train. So if you train sub-failure, I think pretty much all cards are off the table. You could probably train 4 days a week. Now, my thing isn't exactly based on strength training. A month ago, I went rock climbing first time in 20 years. And I went for a session where I climbed for 2 hours and was done. Like, the level of muscular fatigue at the end of it was I couldn't grip onto the wall for longer than 5 seconds at the end of the session. Now, just so happens that prior to doing that, I'd been doing dead hangs off a bar every day, just as a test of recovery. And so the next day I went to hang from the bar and I got a quarter of the time that would be my standard, everything is good time. The day following that, I was about halfway the amount of time that I could do. And then on the third day, I was just about back to where I had been prior to that rock climbing session. So that rock climbing session was a unique novel stimulus, right? It was not something I'd been doing regularly. It was comparable, I would say, to beyond failure training. So training to failure and using techniques, advanced techniques, or advanced overload techniques to the end of the set as well, because of the level of muscle breakdown after that session was significant. So then with this significant stimulus, it took me like effectively 4 days to be back to baseline strength prior to that session. So if you're training that hard, I'm going to say every 4th or 5th day is the most compact you could possibly make your training sessions. And then you might want to add a little bit of time after that, because, you're just jumping straight back into the fire at that point when you've just recovered. So if you're accumulating significant muscular fatigue and muscle damage, you're going to have to wait that kind of period of time to have beneficial ongoing progress in your training. Otherwise, you are going to be short-circuiting it. And I think the most practical tool to know whether your training is online, is working, is your strength. So if your strength is up, you're doing things right. And I wouldn't just say this on one session basis. Like it's like the trend is trend, because, you know, we can all have an off day. But is your trend in strength going up every second workout, every third workout? Are you seeing this nice linear increase? If so, you've got your ducks in a row in terms of volume, frequency, and intensity, and sleep, nutrition, all of the things that combine to give us our ability to exercise and derive benefits from exercise. If you're not increasing strength, barring that, you know, the one-off, you trained on a day where just things just weren't right for whatever, then something's up. Either your volume or in frequency or intensity is off, and you've got to figure that out. And as Mike says in the course, and John repeats, it's like, you've got to figure that out for yourself. Here's the principles, but you've got to figure out, are you at this end of the spectrum or this end of the spectrum? Are you genuinely training that hard that it warrants taking 4, 5, 6 days between a workout? Because if you're not, you're really wasting time. And frankly, if you're not training that hard, you would probably do better to have a greater amount of volume. So then it's like, what are you trying to achieve here? And from what perspective, direction are you coming from? And what do you want to be doing? Something else Mike was very aware of is, what do you want to be spending your time in your life doing? Do you want to be in a gym, you know, 5 days a week, an hour and a half at a time? Or do you want to be in the gym once a week? Where psychologically, where do you fit in on that spectrum? Where do you want to invest your time? Mike was a huge fan of reading about philosophy and focusing on the bigger picture as well. So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
Today's episode is sponsored by Imagine Strength, the game changer in safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training machines. When it comes to HIT, Imagine Strength is your go-to for intelligently designed, efficient, and affordable equipment. Their team is passionate about HIT, and it shows in every piece they craft. So why are Imagine Strength the right choice? Number 1, they tailor-make their equipment for HIT studios. Number 2, they provide cost-effective solutions for your business. And number 3, they are committed to ongoing innovation and refinement. Ready to take your HIT business to the next level? Visit imaginestrength.com to discuss your needs and find the perfect gear for your studio. Join the HIT revolution of Imagine Strength and transform your workout experience today.
That's a great answer. It got me thinking, guys, that like we probably need to do like a 3-hour podcast on this one topic, because it's so interesting and it's so nuanced. And honestly, I could ask you so many questions and we could get really into it, but I'm just conscious that like we want to be talking about other things. So we'll probably just leave that one there for a moment. Simon, you said offline, I think, about your exposures to Mike, which I'm really interested. Obviously, John and I have spoken on a podcast quite a lot about Mike Mentzer in the past. So I'm not sure if you and I have spoken too much about that. So tell me, what were your first interactions like with Mike? Yeah.
Well, my first exposure to Mike was his column in Iron Man magazine, probably in 1997 or 1998. I'd say 98 actually. And I read it, and I think the first couple of times I read his column, I was almost like laughed, because it ran contra. So 99.5% of a magazine is effectively saying one thing. And here's this one column, which is almost saying the opposite about what's in the entire rest of the magazine. And frankly, in every other magazine that was available at that time, because I came up during an era where the information did still come from physical magazines, by the way. So I was reading this and it was like annoying me a little bit, because it's stuck in the back of my head. It's like, why am I in the gym 5, 6 days a week? And this guy's saying this, but it was like a little fly buzzing around inside my head. And then I finished university and took my first job, and it was a really, really, really intense job. They had me working 12-hour days. I was thrown as a manager of Cappuccino Bar. I was working 12-hour days, 6 days a week, American company. It was flipping wild. And I couldn't keep training. I couldn't do it. I couldn't keep up this 5 days a week training I've been doing. And then it was like, Mike Mentzer, So like popped back into my head. So I started reading my old issues and go, well, what have I got to lose? Like I'm driving myself into the ground with work commitment and my strength training, which I perceived as being a very important commitment at the same time. And the two, adult life, work commitment, my perceived amounts of time I need to commit to strength training just were not working. That wasn't happening. Wasn't working for me. So I started reading more of his stuff. I probably sent off to Mike's postal thing for Heavy Duty 2, got that, consumed it. And I was just fascinated because this was the first time that as an adult, I was being introduced to philosophy by a bodybuilder. And I was like, this is something else. I want to speak to this guy. So I arranged a consultation with Mike and we arranged the time, maybe for his secretary, PA at the time. And I called him up and I would say it was very similar to what I've heard many people say about their first communication with Arthur Jones. Is like Mike talked and I listened for an hour and a half. It wasn't quite like that because he did leave a little gap and he was interested in what I had been doing and my perspectives on strength training and philosophy. And then he gave me a program and said, go away, do this and call me back in. I think it was 2 months, maybe 2.5 months, something like that. But yeah, I was just blown away. He came at a time in my life where there was a gap for me. Things weren't working. There was a gap. And I guess I had a need for philosophy as well. And he really spoke to me. Just getting me to open my mind. Because, I've been studying at university. I've been studying business and marketing at university. But I hadn't opened my mind up at that point to the world of philosophy. And then that's probably one of the disciplines that's most important to me in the world. So yeah, the conversations were strength training driven, but I tell you what, there was even a little bit more of a spark of passion when Mike was talking about philosophy than there was about when he was talking about strength training. And John, maybe you would.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. No,
because there's more to life, gentlemen.
Well, that's good. And, it's interesting. I look back on a 21-year actually friendship with Mike. And my most enjoyable times with him weren't in the gym. They were, at his place or we're at a cafe and we're just talking, and his insight, his earlier insights on existentialism got me interested in philosophy as well, just like so. And he was very well read. I know that a lot of people that came to Mike late in life, like 1995 onward, assumed that he'd only ever read Ayn Rand. But that wasn't true. His initial passion was psychology, and he had read Freud and Jung and Wilhelm Reich and R.D. Laing and Thomas Saz. And then he gravitated to Jean-Paul Sartre and Friedrich Nietzsche and Dostoevsky. And Ayn Rand was, interestingly enough, he had read her in 1977. And the first book he read was Atlas Shrugged, which is this monstrous book. And it had zero impact on him. He said he read it as a literary duty. And, but he wasn't impressed with the philosophy. It was, a story was okay. And then he was on to something else.
But did he ever become, sorry to cut you off, but when he started his, different business ventures, he had the heavy duty merchandise that came later, didn't it? But he was doing consultations. Didn't he have other businesses? I'm just saying this because I would have thought Atlas Shrugged would have inspired him in terms of the capitalistic side of him, if he ever had a part of that to him, or an entrepreneurial side to him. Because I find it very inspiring from that point of view, that book. Yeah.
No, not initially he didn't.
Okay.
It had an impact of somewhere between zero and very little when he first read. It was only later, much later, that he went into Ayn Rand's other works and the works of other objectivist philosophers, that he became very enraptured by the logic of it. He really, really liked that. And And maybe coming from a bodybuilding background where, value, integrity, honesty were in very short supply, he liked to see someone who extolled those virtues and said, here are the reasons why it's important. But like Simon, my time with Mike was the most enjoyable time was spent just talking. And invariably we would talk about ideas, and, the realm of the intellect, as he called it. And training was fine, but being with him, it made me appreciate that it was an adjunct to your life and not the reason for your life. Yeah. Like going to the dentist. Yeah, it's important for dental hygiene, keep your teeth clean. And yes, it's important for your muscular system and your physiology to exercise it. But it shouldn't become a religion, where you have to go and, your obedience, 7 days a week. That wasn't what it was. And interestingly enough, and just to digress for a moment, I'm presently writing Mike's biography, which has caused me to really go into my stuff. But what struck me, and this was true with Arthur Jones as well, for different reasons, but Mike's passion was to develop the ultimate physique. That was what drove him. Competition was a means of seeing where you still needed to refine certain things, where you needed to improve. So if you lose to, say, Cal Skalak in 1977, what did Cal have that I did? Where was my miscalculation? How can I improve? And it was all science-based. Even the steroid use was science-based, as far as Mike was concerned, steroids are part of chemistry. And last time he checked, chemistry was part of science. So he was bringing all of that to bear on building this ultimate physique. Fast forwarding to 1981, when he recognized that the bodybuilding, the roads to bodybuilding glory, Mr. Olympia, for example, had been sealed off to him. And that it really wasn't necessarily the best physique that was going to win the show. This was a business masquerading as a sport. The passion was gone. He wasn't interested in training just to keep in shape. He wasn't interested in training to get people to come up and say, hey, you look great for your age. He wasn't interested in competing for a Masters Mr. Olympia title, to be on stage with a group of people that couldn't compete for the real Olympia title. It was gone. He had no interest in.
So he just stopped training at that point when.
It's just like, and Simon knows, and I know people that don't work out. They just don't. They have no interest in doing other stuff. And we can tell them all about all the benefits of high intensity training and working out. And it's like, yeah, well.
But what about his, just huge thirst for knowledge? And, would he not have, it's one of those where it's like, he's such an intelligent individual, right? And wants to, sounds very motivated in terms of wanting to wait. I think Simon, you said it. I think one of you guys said it, that I everything's merging for me now. It's either the prep I did for this or one of the things you guys said is that you wake up in the morning and you just want to learn, you want to gain knowledge, right? It's like, well, wouldn't you want to look after yourself and work out to obviously, optimize quality of life, physical function, etc., so that you can continue that mission with.
We view all of this through the filter of exercise being supreme importance. It's the jewel in the crown, right?
Well, I don't mean that. I just mean it's one of those.
It is, right? It's like that's what we do. You're in the exercise business. Simon's in the exercise business. I'm in the exercise business. It's important. It's very important to us. And
Right.
we like studies that show how important it is to lifestyle. And, we quote Socrates, and he saw the value of this. But we have to remember that we're a very small percentage of the population. Most people could care less about not just going to a gym, but about physical activity of any kind. And, I agree with you that we know the value of it, and gaining knowledge, but think of it this way. Mike always spoke about hierarchy of knowledge. So if you're a bodybuilder and you're competing for the highest prize in bodybuilding, that, exercise, bodybuilding, what have you, is extremely important to you. That's your career. It's your livelihood. And it's also, as you mentioned, like an art, if you will. So it's everything all together in once, rolled into one thing. But now you go into, and you see it in politics everywhere. For example, in the United States right now, there's this huge conflict. And the conflicts get manufactured every election cycle, but there's a huge conflict about the loss of freedoms, right? The loss of personal liberty, the self-expression of that. Now, if you're one of these people that takes that very serious, how important is adding another quarter inch to your arm, right? And Mike's thing too with philosophy was especially when he was in his objectivist period near the end of his life, he was really anti-collectivist. He wanted people to think for themselves, which had a direct application to everything and anything you do. That was his priority. So that's where the knowledge was. And compared to that, and there's other reasons too, which we can go into, but compared to that, the training component for him was not nearly as strong as it could have been. Now, when I say other things, I mean, Mike had suffered a torn tricep. He'd had a neck surgery. He'd had blood clotting issues on the lungs, not things your physician is saying, hey, get in the gym and
Right.
So there were other factors, but his priorities had shifted at that point. He was a teacher. I think he saw himself as a teacher at that point, rather than an athlete or a competitor or someone who wanted to, as I mentioned, look good for his age. Those to him were not really priorities at that point.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Would you say, John, that there's a
yes, you with the colorful sweater. Yes.
I put my hand up. Would you say that there's an element, an aspect of Mike's personality that meant that he was quite all or nothing in whatever he approached?
Yeah, there very much is. In fact, he said that. I'm trying to think of the source, but he said that he had gone into the gym at one point just to try, just to keep in shape, if you will, and was doing it. But he soon found that his temperament was such that he had to go all out. And so it was all or nothing with Mike. So he was a bit like a terrier on a bone. He just couldn't let it go.
What I'm still quite positive about though, John, is just because he's a real smart guy, and he obviously, I mean, I've seen footage of him talking about the health benefits. He understood it better than anyone back then, right? In terms of the cardiovascular benefit of strength training, etc., I saw a really old video of him talking about that. I thought, wow, like that was a long time ago, and he was saying it then. And yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. What you're saying, yes, applies to most people. But I would have thought Mike, of all people, understands the value of strength training. Fine, he's not competing anymore at professional level. Wants to direct his efforts elsewhere into philosophy, other things. But he's also knows better than most people. I can do very little and get a lot in terms of exercise. So why not keep something going? I mean, obviously you said there about maybe the doctors were saying, hey, you've got this and this and this, blood clots, etc. Probably don't work too hard, which I don't know, maybe there was some friction there, but it doesn't click for me.
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression that he eschewed it.
Yeah.
He did go into the gym, and he was, in fact, in one of his interviews, I think it came out in 97, he said he had gone into the gym and was making good progress. He was about at 80% of what he was. His workouts lasted about 12 minutes. But then I think that's when the health problems hit. And there certainly was a genetic component. I mean, when Mike died, and Ray as well, there was severe coronary disease that was through him. And again, he had forget what it's called. Damn it. But it's almost like like a screen or a sieve that's installed in the upper thigh to filter out any potential clotting agents or clots that could come up. He had been put on a very potent blood thinner called Coumadin, and he had suffered a nosebleed. It came like a Niagara Falls to the point where he had to go to the hospital. And at that point, they inserted this. So, I'm going to assume that in the last year of his life, at least, he was told, do not do anything.
I see. Yeah.
So I may have been overstating the matter. But it's
he told me he was training in 1999 when I spoke to him.
Was it? Yeah. So what have been the last 2 years?
He said specifically, my chest is looking quite pendulous, young man.
Oh, very good. That's funny. All right, Jen. So just, I guess move on to some more things and then we'll wrap up because I know we're over the hour mark here. I was going to ask you a bit about, I guess you've already really answered the question about Mike Mentzer's approach being frequently misunderstood and that being part of the motivation to get content out there so that he could speak for himself, have his own platform, as you said it there, John. I am actually interested in talking a bit more about his, personally, I mean, maybe it's because I've spoken to you a whole bunch, John. I've read about Mike's training programs. I read the Mike Mentzer Way, which you wrote. So I feel like I'm quite familiar with his programs. I'm more interested in his philosophy, right? So I'd love maybe, I don't know, any stories that come to mind for you, John, in terms of those conversations you're having outside the gym that became more philosophical. Anything comes to mind that you sort of look back on and smile every now and again these days? Not to pick you on the spot.
It's hard to think of an example. I mean, the examples come to me usually when I'm alone. It's like, oh yeah. And like I mentioned about his statement about truth, I remember, it's interesting. Irene House did an interview with Mike in Muscle Mag International, kind of an interview profile. And that's where he mentioned existentialism about 1981. And I was a young guy. I think I was at college, about to go into university. And I thought, wow, like this is the first time I'd ever seen, like Simon mentioned, sort of this really brilliant, not brilliant, but very intelligent mind in a bodybuilder's type physique. I'd never seen that combination. And here he is talking about existentialism and how the individual has to take responsibility for himself, and you can't voice your dilemmas onto a god or something else. You're responsible for that. And it was like, I was 20 maybe, and I thought, gee, this is cool stuff. I want to learn more. So I went and bought Walter Kaufman's book, Existentialism, from, I forget what it was, from Dostoevsky to Sartre, I forget the title, but anyway, it was an overview of existentialism and the history. And so fast forwarding 1986, I went to California to interview Mike. And I took a buddy of mine from where I live here.
Hang on, was that when you first met Mike as well?
No, I first met Mike in 1980 at a breakfast seminar in Toronto.
Okay. But did you become good friends from this point? 86 was it, or was it?
Oh, yeah, 86 is when we really became better friends, for sure. Because I ended up staying at his place for a week, I remember. But the first visit out to California, my buddy and I picked Mike up. He said he was going to Gold's Gym to work out. And I thought, great, because I was writing for Bodybuilding Monthly, which was a UK magazine at the time. And I thought, I'll take some pictures, write about the workout, interview Mike. So
was he in prime? Sorry to keep interrupting. Was he in? I don't know that my timelines very well. Was he in really good shape back then? Was that when he would be?
Yeah, that was when the watch incident you referenced.
Oh, I see.
I've never seen arms as big, and he wasn't on steroids at the time, so that speaks to genetics. I mean, just big, big guy. He wasn't ripped by any means, but he had the kind of physique that any one of us would have killed for. Even then.
I would have killed for his physique as a 14-year-old, Frank.
Yeah. But anyway, after the workout, my buddy and I are in California. We didn't know anybody at the time, had nothing much to do. And he said, well, I'm going to this memory course taught by a guy named Rex Dante. Did you want to come? You might like it. And to me, it was like, hey, hang out with Mike Mentzer. I'm all over it, So we picked Mike up, and on the way to this memory course, which was in downtown LA, and we were coming from West Hollywood. I had this list of questions that I wanted to ask Mike about philosophy, specific philosophy question. Has the universal purpose? Is it driven by blind chance? All these things, what is the good life, ethical life? How does one build character? And I'd already spoken about training. I thought, well, I was in the back seat, Mike was in the front seat, and my buddy was driving. I thought, well, I got my tape recorder. Why don't I just ask him this in the car? So I did. Just extemporaneous off the top of his head. These answers were phenomenal.
And you have the recording still?
Yeah, I've actually put them up on YouTube. It's called Philosophy in a Car, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Volume 1, Volume 2, but I think there's 2 parts to it, just because he went into it. But he went into ethics, he went into values, concepts, nature of concepts, history of concepts. And this is all just off the top of his head. Well, he's talking over his shoulder to me in the back seat. And then I'd go home and I would, transcribe this or listen to it. It was like this concentrated lore during a car ride somewhere. In fact, when we went to Rex Dante's memory course, I was less impressed with Dante than I was with Mike just on the way there. It was, so there was lots I learned, but a lot of it was kind of like homework. You take the audios home, you'd transcribe it and you'd say, wow, like that's really interesting. That's impressive. That makes me want to learn more. And it did. Somewhere here, I know he used to subscribe to a little objectivist publication. I forget what it's called. I think I said Simon Shawcross.
Objectivist Forum.
Thank you. And they're heavily annotated, like, underlined, marginalia. But he was reading constantly. And my one regret was that when I was at his apartment, he went out for a meeting. There was talks about doing a video at that time. So he was meeting with the producers and left me alone in his apartment. So, being the natural that I am, I'm looking around, looking at books, putting them back. And he had a cassette player on like a portable cassette player. And I thought, oh, what's on that? So I played it, and Mike was talking about philosophy, and he had been
You were going for his personal journal there, John.
I know, I was pretty bad, but I was snooping. So anyway, he had been he was driving his car, and he was at a stoplight or something, and then the idea came to him, and he speak into this tape, and I remember it was really cool. And I wish I'd made a copy of it, but I got suddenly overcome by a pain of conscience, and I thought, this is his personal stuff. Don't just, that's not your business. So I let it be. And it's too bad, because I would love to have heard that, the full tape. But yeah, the philosophy was fascinating, and it was omniprevalent. Like everything was, for a purpose, and at the very least causing you to think about things, not just training, but life, relationships. And that was one of the things I asked him, what's his criteria for friendship? And he said, mutuality of value. He said, how could we be friends if we had different values? What could I share with you? And it was just, but instant like that.
Yeah.
I wasn't like, oh, well, let me ponder that for a minute. It was boom. It was, and to me, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. That is a good definition of friendship.
Yeah. You go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, staying on the philosophy topic as we're on it, that was the reason, effectively, me and John went to Greece to meet up, him from Canada, me from UK, to explore some of Mike's philosophical influences and spend some time in these ancient places that had meant so much to Mike. And so we were walking around, we went to, where do we go, John?
Went to the Lyceum, Aristotle's Lyceum of ruins, Plato's Academy. We went to the Agora where Socrates plied his trade. And I mean, we went all sorts of places. We went to, Athens, of course, which was where they celebrated a healthy mind and a healthy body, which was part of Mike's philosophy. We went to Thermopylae, where Leonidas and his Spartans held off the Persians. We went to where, it's where the word came down that Socrates was the wisest man in Athens because he knew nothing, or that's what Socrates concluded. But the oracle said that he was the wisest man. And interestingly enough, it was in Delphi where Plato wrestled. He was the wrestler. And his name, Plato, isn't even his name. It's his name, Mr. Heavy Duty. And Plato means broad, like broad shoulder. So he was a big, strong guy and won the Pythian Games. And we went up to the level where the athletic track still exists and where Plato would have wrestled. So that was very cool. But it was just, the whole thing was almost a sensory overload when you see the ancient statues and bronzes that they have in Athens. And it was fantastic. And standing on, I'd always said to myself, ever since I was in university, if they ever, back then they didn't know where Aristotle's school was. They just knew it was outside of Athens. If they ever find it, I would love to get a piece of gravel from that ground. And now I'm pleased to say, with all respect to the authorities in Athens, I don't.
And what was the purpose of that? Obviously, that's really great experience, but were you guys actually producing some of the course over there as well?
Yes.
That's the point. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were walking and talking, and I suppose, without getting mystical about it, Mike was with us in spirit as we were walking, or we were doing it in his honor because we knew how much these places and the philosophies that came from them meant to Mike. And so we were discussing Mike in relation to that. And in fact, I think our pinnacle conversation in the whole course happened in the final night after we'd seen all these places. We were about to go our respective ways back to our respective countries. And we had one sort of final sit down, shot 2 hours worth of really going into depth into Mike's life and the perspective, having this experience together in this place, but was such a intellectual inspiration for my healthy mind and healthy body, as John just said. Yeah, it really sort of, it solidified all that material we created for the course, and really the story of Mike's progression of his career, his rise, his fall, his redemption, the challenges that he faced. Yeah.
It was awesome.
It was because that was the birthplace. I mean, Mike referenced Aristotle and Plato in many of his lectures. And again, the celebration of a healthy mind and a healthy body, and the birthplace of science and logic, with Aristotle, and philosophy with Plato, some would say Thales, but that was the cradle of Western civilization, and most certainly of Western thought and education. The first school or academy was Plato's. So yeah, Mike was beholden to his intellectual ancestors. It was nice to go there with our knowledge of what Mike had taught Simon and I, and sort of pay homage to those who, upon whose shoulders Mike stood.
Yeah, no, it sounds great, guys. It sounds like you've done a great job, and really interested to hear from those who buy the course and consume it, and what their take on it is. So one thing I've probably said to you before, and I'm wondering if this is an idea that probably resonates with both of you, and it's a little bit off topic, but I love the way you do things with HITuni, where, I hope again you don't mind me saying this, but you're not like one of these manic producers. You're not one of these people who produce a blog post every week or content every week or a course every month. It's slow and steady. It's I don't know if you guys have followed Cal Newport. He's just published his latest book. He's famed for writing deep work. He's just published Slow Productivity, which really resonates with me. It's a philosophy for productivity, I guess, which is based on three things, which is number one, do less things. This is a encounter to the modern knowledge worker, right? Who's just overwhelmed and burnt out. Number 2 is work at a sustainable pace, and number 3 is obsess over quality. And I feel like both of you really, what's the word? Really, sort of maybe even unknowingly follow this approach in your own professional lives. It seems to me. So with yourself, Simon, it's like, you know, you'll put just every now and again, you'll put out a blog post or a video that's just, they're really high quality and really helpful and will go viral, and I'm almost a little bit jealous, to be honest. And we'll obviously, you know, to help you grow the business. And the same with the courses. You don't do a lot, but then they come out every now and again, and they're just very impactful. And I don't know whether I think you and I maybe discussed this before, but is that very deliberate from your perspective? Because I know you're a very balanced individual. You're not like one of these people where entrepreneurship is like all you focus on. You have lots of dimensions to your life. So is that very deliberate, that pacing with HITuni?
Sometimes.
It's an accident.
To round out the answer a little bit more. First thing is, I have to be inspired. I have to be passionate about what I'm doing. I struggle to do anything that I'm not passionate about. If the motivation isn't there, if I'm not hugely fascinated by a thing or a subject or a person, I might as well not step down that road one step in the first place, because I'm not going to do my best work. And I guess maybe there's some stuff that I start, but you just don't see, because that ain't it. So that's not going anywhere. But I needed to work through it personally to go, yeah, that's not what it is. That's not something I want to put out or do. So I mean, I guess behind the scenes there might be stuff where I'm working on something and I get a certain way, and I'm like, no, that's not it. It's not fit for public consumption. Maybe not even my own.
I just put it out.
So yeah. But then you know, I'm aware that I have an element of perfectionism in my nature as well. So if I do something, like, I will wrangle it in my brain. If it's something that will eventually come out, I'll wrangle it. I'll reposition it. I'll try and look at it from every angle possible. I'll want to get opposing viewpoints, because I don't want to look at a thing through one lens. And I think there's a really big risk of doing that in today's world. It's like, there's so much stuff that people want to latch on or attach to a very niche way of looking at a topic or a subject. But I think it's, you know, it's good to know, like, a really broad perspective, and then see where your stuff fits in within this wide perspective, and why the reasons why you're going down this particular path, what's drawn you to it, and what value you can add. And I think, yeah, maybe I haven't always been aware of this, but my real driving motivator with this course in particular was to honor somebody who'd been an absolute mentor and an inspiration for me, had come into my life at a period of time that was very, very, very challenging, and had meant so much to me, more so than, I mean, he would ever have known. And yet here we are, 25 years later, or whatever it is now, talking about this individual who had an impact on many, you know, far from just me, on, you know, John, and to some degree, I'm sure in your thinking or as well, Lawrence. But yeah. And then the other thing I want to do is, when I do put something out, that it can benefit as many people as possible. So it's of benefit. I don't just want to chew up people's time with stuff, just because I want, you know, a product out there or a face out there or something like that. I want it to be something that will stand the test of time. And it's not just like a viral bubble that happens and it's here today, gone tomorrow. And I'm just saying it for the sake of saying it, because I've got to keep up with saying something. I'm not comfortable with that. That wouldn't, I don't think that would work for me as an individual. I wouldn't feel authentic doing that. So Again, I don't know. You get me on these questions that really excite me, and I give you long-winded answers. I hope that kind of covers the basis.
No, it's just fascinating to me because I think I'm trying to move more in that direction myself. In terms of the way I describe those three principles, and I see from afar watching you, Simon, what the way HITuni evolves. I kind of see that. Well, at least that's what it looks like, and you kind of said it's kind of by accident. But I don't know, just from different conversations I've had with you, I know obviously you've got family and other things that you're interested in, and I don't want to make this sound like you're not putting. I don't want people who are like customers of HITuni like, does Simon not work on this every single day for like 24 hours? I'm like, no, but that probably wouldn't be productive if he did because he'd be burnt out, and it's kind of my point I'm trying to make.
But the other
go ahead.
super cool thing that I do love is getting to engage with people. So when somebody takes a course and get to the end and we have that conversation, it's like that's when I know, because that's when I get that feedback of like how much they've taken from something we produced. And like the feedback we've had on the Mentzer course already, it's like, and you go, yeah, you've done something that adds genuine value to that individual's life, is providing a value. And to me, that's it. Have they walked away? And it's the same with the exam interviews we do at HITuni as well. When somebody completes their course, comes to completion, it's like that human interaction at the end of the day from what is an online mechanism, and it's delivered through video, delivered through thing, but to have that feedback, that sounding board, that's of huge importance as well.
And John, going back to last time we spoke, you were really transparent about how you make a living and how a big part of that is Nautilus North, the training studio, and then everything else is kind of around the edges. I'm hopeful now, given your amazing YouTube success, that you can really focus even more on your writing, assuming that is what you would like to be focused more on.
Yeah, no, I enjoy writing.
You're a big time YouTuber now, John. Is that weird to think about?
Yeah, well, it's by accident. And I was very ignorant of YouTube and algorithms, and I still am. I just put out material on the front that I think may be of interest to people, much like Simon spoke about. But yeah, no, I like writing. I think my writing has improved actually over the past 4 years. When I got out of just exclusively exercise writing, which can be technical, done a book on Tom Thompson, which means nothing to most people. The Donnellys, 2 volumes, one on Bruce Lee. Turned to that venue briefly just to examine his real fights and determine whether or not he could really fight. And presently on Mike. So yeah, I do enjoy writing. And when I was in the midst of this present book, I thought, I don't think there's anything else I want to write about, because again, I write about subjects that I'm fascinated by. Doesn't necessarily translate into the public being fascinated by it, but I want to learn more about it. I get obsessive down the rabbit hole in research. I go, so, cathartic. It's out of my body. Once I've written a book, that's funny. I did a podcast on the Donnellys, which I wrote I think it was published in 2018. And the podcaster asked me a very basic question, like how many children were in the Donnelly family? And I was blank. It was out of my head. And I couldn't believe it. It was like, I knew every one of their biographies intimately when I was writing that book. And, but once I finished writing the book, it was like, that old Zen maxim about the teacup, you overflow, but you got to empty your cup, so you can take in more knowledge and write about other things. So yeah, I think I answered your question. I'm not sure.
But well, not really, but it's fine. No. John, at this stage, how many books have you wrote yourself?
Including editing, like with Bruce Lee's stuff, I edited.
Yeah, I'd squeeze that in there.
Probably 45, I guess.
Wow. It's incredible. Yeah, it's amazing. No, because you're such a polymath, right? You run all this north. Yeah, I think that's a fair label, right?
I'm right up there with Da Vinci.
With Da Vinci. With who's the famous physicist? Richard Feynman, you know. But like, you know, you're training people at the Nautilus North. You're writing all this stuff. You're now a YouTuber. You know, you're every 15-year-old these days wants to be a YouTuber, right? You're their idol. You know, yeah, you're creating these online courses, Simon. I mean, it's just fascinating. I love it.
The online course is Simon's genius. It's funny though. From my end of it, I just love getting together with someone who had a passion for Mike as I did. And we would just shoot the shit for like every Monday for about 2 hours. We'd bring up a topic. It was like a symposium in ancient Greece, you know. This week we're going to discuss this, and we'd back and forth. And I look forward to speaking with Simon every Monday. It was like, great. This is, you know, I'd get my coffee and sit down and we would, you know, go down the rabbit hole of various aspects of Mike. And then it was up to Simon to take hours of what would have been
200 hours of.
Yeah. How is that editing that, Simon? Because it's because John has a habit of, you know, you ask him a question, he just goes and it's all gold. So how do you edit that?
With great difficulty. with blood time. That's why it took 2 years.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, no,
right.
there's just like, so like there's literally like, you're right. John drops these gems. I mean, it's like, there's so many little facets he knows. Like there's this beautiful story. It comes up in the course of, I don't remember the exact context for it, but it's where Mike's at the Veterans Hospital. Are you taking Mike to the Veterans Hospital, right?
Oh, I remember this.
And then he's got to go and got to go to his appointment, and then he stops because there's this U.S. Air Service man, and he goes and gives him the advice about how to fill the papers in correctly. And it's just like there's these paintings of color of Mike's life, parts that I've never seen or heard before. But John they're just, you know, pop back into his brain. Like he says, the cup's empty. Sometimes it gets refilled, and it's like, oh yeah, have this.
Yeah, it's a very human moment, wasn't it? Sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I always remember what you would say. Is it Mike said something, again, I'm not sure, maybe he was, we were all inspired by other people, right? But he says something about how to feel grief, to feel pain, etc. It's all part of the human experience. And that's, yeah. What was that, sorry?
Terence. So I learned this from John. It's Terence, the Roman playwright, who Mike was quoting.
Right. Okay.
Nothing human is foreign to me. Yeah,
that's it. That's the line. Nothing human is foreign to me. I love that. Yeah, that stuck. Few things just from our previous podcast really stuck with me, John, on that stuff. Gents, this has been great. I feel obviously today it's gone well over scheduled time, but we still kept things relatively high level. I feel like we could do more in the future if you're both up for it. We'll be really just get into like a couple of specific topics, and frankly, that's down to me and better preparation. So maybe next time we'll do that. Just before we wrap, let's just make sure we got the right places we're sending people. So if people want to find out more about the course, Simon, do you want to give us the right details for that?
Yeah, so it is obviously HITuni.com. And yeah, so you go to the courses section on that page, and I think we've got the Mike Mentzer course, the life and legacy of Mike Mentzer, right at the top of the courses, the short courses section there. So super visible to all at that point.
Cool. Yeah, the life and legacy of Mike Mentzer, a great picture of his physique where he's showing his fantastic calves. I love it. And for everyone listening or watching as well, if you would like 10% off the course, please use a code HIB10. That's H Hotel Indigo Bravo, just to be clear. 10 to get 10% off. And also, John, how do people find out about you? Is it Amazon? We still send them these days just to see all of the books if they type your name, or is there other places you'd like to send people? Obviously, Heavy Duty College on YouTube. 132,000 subscribers and counting. Fantastic videos. I watched the one today about how Mike Mentzer used to hit on the ladies. Actually, that's not what it's about. It's about how women are attracted to him and how his whole perspective on that is fascinating. I was like watching it thinking, handsome, annoying man as I'm watching it. Anyways, John, what's other places we can send people that come to mind?
That's fine. I don't have a designated webpage, and I would be more interested in people learning as I did from Mike than, coming to me per se. So yeah, Simon and my course on Simon's HITuni is good. And then, and that also actually will take you to the relevant Mike Mentzer videos on YouTube.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's hituni.com, guys, HITuni.com. Find out all about the life and legacy of Mike Mentzer and all of the rest of the courses there too, which are great. I've personally done the personal trainer course, which is fantastic. I go back to our course all the time, Simon, when I'm looking for exercises for clients or even my own training. I always go back to the directory. I find it really great. Great, guys. Well, look, thanks so much for your time. Really great to see you both, and hopefully we'll do much more in the future. And for everyone listening, to get the show notes for this, please go to the website, highintensitybusiness.com. And there'll be a list of show notes on the blog post, episode 461. If you just click the podcast list, you'll see that, or search 461. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.
Hey, it's Lawrence again. Before you go, I have something special for those looking to accelerate their HIIT business. Would you like to know how to generate a flood of leads for free? Download our exclusive Builder Referral Machine Playbook. It's a concise guide packed with proven strategies from Luke Carlson, CEO of Discover Strength, a fast-growing HIIT franchise. Clients in our HIIT business membership using these referral tactics have added 20 to 40 new clients, transforming their businesses dramatically. In this playbook, you'll uncover 4 dynamic referral tactics that you can implement right now to drive leads. Plus, when you download the guide, you'll gain access to invaluable resources to expand your business, like ready-to-use sales presentations, a guide for attracting top-notch trainers, a checklist for nailing your sales process, and so much more. And there's a bonus. Subscribe today to ensure you don't miss out on exclusive opportunities like live group calls with HIIT experts. Plus, you have the chance to contribute questions for our interactive Q&A blog posts and podcasts, where we directly address your queries with industry experts. These special events are scheduled periodically, and as a subscriber, you'll be the first to know when they happen. Just visit highintensitybusiness.com/ref. That's REF, short for referrals. highintensitybusiness.com/ref, or click the link available where you're watching or listening to this. Drop in your email, and you'll get instant access to all these resources today. This episode is brought to you by Imagine Strength, your go-to for safe, simple, and effective high-intensity training equipment. Growing a successful high-intensity training business requires workout equipment that's not only high quality, but also intelligently designed to fit the unique needs of your studio. And that's where Imagine Strength comes in. Drawing on the wisdom of the legendary Arthur Jones, Imagine Strength has crafted a groundbreaking line of fitness equipment that's as affordable as it is efficient, giving your studio the upgrade it needs without breaking the bank. The team at Imagine Strength breathes HIIT. Their passion for high-intensity training shines through in their designs, which they've consistently refined and innovated for optimum effectiveness and user experience. From my personal experience at Rec, I can attest to the careful consideration and craftsmanship that goes into every single piece. My Imagine Strength workout was absolutely brutal, in a good way, of course. Now, what makes Imagine Strength truly stand out? They have innovative equipment tailored for the unique needs of HIIT studios, affordable and efficient designs, lowering the barriers to entry for a HIIT business, continuous innovation and refinement ensuring your studio stays ahead of the curve. Founder Jeff Turner and his team are dedicated to moving the HIIT industry forward and making strength training accessible to more people than ever before. Here's how you get started. Number 1, visit imaginestrength.com. Number 2, discuss your specific needs with the team. And number 3, select the equipment that will propel your business to the next level. Head to imaginestrength.com today and give your HIIT business the Imagine Strength edge. Be part of the HIIT revolution and see firsthand how their unique equipment can transform your studio's workout experience. Elevate your HIIT business with Imagine Strength.
Let's go.